Please be respectful.
Vice Chair, if I could, just another reminder for the decorum of the room, please.
Hello, this is Daniel Parker with USARK Florida. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the recent FWC Commission meeting that was May 21st and 22nd. There were some revisions done to the Prohibited Species Rules, so that's something that reptile keepers will be interested in. But most of the people that came to this meeting were most interested in the issue of a bear hunt. That's a very emotional issue in Florida, and it has been getting a lot of media coverage. And it was actually the biggest crowd that I'd ever seen at an FWC meeting. The main room where they have the meeting was totally packed out. So they actually had 2 overflow rooms. The parking lot filled up, and they had to have people park across the street. So the agenda item that FWC was considering this meeting on a bear hunt was basically whether or not they would have a bear hunt at all, and then also some of the more specific regulations that would be involved in having a bear hunt. I would say the majority of people there speaking were against having a bear hunt, but the commission did vote overwhelmingly to have one.
Said we fully support the proposal. We support everything about it, from the numbers to the traditional methods. Everything as it is, we fully support it based on the science, and we look forward to your continued hard work on this.
The unusually dense state of Florida does not have a bear population. It has 7 subpopulations that are genetically and geographically isolated from each other, due mainly to the obliteration of natural habitats in Florida over many decades. Habitat in virtually all of these isolated pockets continues to disappear and fragment due to unrelenting growth and road building.
So we're going to be voting on alternative 2. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed?
Aye.
Okay. So it's 4-1.
FWC did vote 4-1 in favor of approving the bear hunt, and that was for the draft rule, and it will come up for final approval in August. So if that's approved in August by the commission, then the bear hunt would actually start possibly as early as December of this year. The issue of primary concern to reptile keepers is some revision of the Prohibited Species Rules. Now, we're not talking about them totally doing away with Prohibited Species Rules. Iguanas, tegus, pythons, and some of the other large snake species are still going to remain on the prohibited species list. So that's not changing, but they are going to open up to more collection from the wild and sale out of state primarily for iguanas. There are a few loosened restrictions for tegus, but they still aren't opening that up to new people, which is something that we're still pushing them on. The main issue coming up at this meeting was opening up iguanas to more collection, and Sarah Funk.
Sarah Funch?
Funk.
Funk?
From the Division of Habitat and Species Conservation for FWC made the presentation.
Today, I'm going to be presenting proposed rule changes for non-native fish and wildlife in Florida.
So FWC has made the argument in the past that iguanas were open to collection and sale, but from what most of us know, this wasn't realistic and it wasn't happening that much because there were so many regulations and red tape around iguanas, and there were actually only 5 entities within the state that were permitted to be exporting iguanas out of state. So what these new regulations will do is open that up to anybody that wants to apply. Now, they still will have to meet the biosecurity requirements, and that's a discussion we're having. FWC has promised that they're going to address that, but as of right now, the caging regulations have not changed. It will be open to any Florida citizens that want to apply, and you can get a permit and you can sell them to a dealership that's permitted to be exported out of state. The first draft that was presented at the TAG committee and that was presented at the public meetings that were held, we didn't think was a reasonable proposition. We didn't think that most people would participate. So we did push for a lot of changes, and to their credit, FWC did give a lot of concessions and did amend the proposed rules with our feedback. So we're happy about that, but they still didn't go far enough. We're still pushing them, but what they did approve was good. So under these rules that were just approved, anyone can apply for a commercial use permit for iguanas, and you don't have to prove that you had animals before 2021, before the prohibited species rules were passed. New people will be allowed, which was a big deal. We really pushed hard, and they finally gave in on that. Trappers with eradication permits will now be able to transfer those animals to commercial entities that are permitted to sell and export them out of state. So there's no longer going to be a 24-hour period after which the animals have to be euthanized. Another thing we obviously push very hard on, we don't want more animals being euthanized. So we were very against that when FWC staff brought it up, and we're glad that they revised it. Another big change that we worked very hard with FWC on is that there will no longer be a pit tagging or microchipping requirement for baby iguanas or for any iguanas if they're held for less than 30 days. So that's a very big deal, and we believe that microchipping of babies was kind of unethical, cruel. You could possibly kill the animals while you're doing this. So it was never really a reasonable requirement for baby iguanas especially. Here are a few more changes. Prohibited species pet permits will transfer to permanent status. So this is going to eliminate the need to do annual renewals. That's good. That's reducing paperwork and red tape. Cohabitation of tegus and green iguanas under 9 inches will be allowed, so you won't have to keep them separated by sex, which was the previous requirement. Though if any iguanas breed or any tegus, it's still required to destroy eggs. So no breeding is allowed under these new rules. Another good thing that we're happy about is that law enforcement with FWC will have expanded options for placing prohibited species that are of confiscated or rescue prohibited animals. So they're going to be able to place them with more people. We hope that this is going to mean there's going to be less killing of animals and more finding animals that need homes, which is something that we know is important to all of us reptile keepers and something that's been a big issue for FWC in the past. Several members of the reptile community and the reptile industry and representatives of USARK Florida specifically made comments at the meeting.
Then if I can get Dean, Michael, Jordan, and Elizabeth to the front so we can keep it all moving. So,
people are telling me all the time, we're out here, we're out walking around, we see tegus, we want to capture them, we want to tell somebody, but if you're just going to kill them, they're not going to do that. People want to save this wildlife. They want to move them out of the state, and they want to be a partner with FWC. They want to do the right thing, but we need to give them the opportunity of being working partners.
A clutch of tegu eggs could be worth upwards to $3,000.
There's one last thing we also want to bring up, and something we hope the commission and staff will consider going forward, is looking at allowing the keeping and breeding of iguanas with visibly distinctive aberrant color patterns, such as albino and amelanistic, as is allowed for red-eared sliders. This rule works for the red-eared slider turtles, and we believe it would work for the iguanas as well.
So as I said before, there are still things that we're working on with FWC. One thing that we would like to see is the caging requirements be relaxed for keeping iguanas outdoors.
You actually need a lighter cage to keep a lion in Florida than to keep iguanas. So we actually submitted a substantive comment, including amending caging standards utilizing 16 gauge 1/2 inch by 1 inch wire would be one alternative instead of the concrete cage requirement that's currently in place.
So we think that's pretty silly and something that should be changed.
We are all on board with moving forward with a final ruling today, with the caveat that caging requirements will be considered later down the road.
Yep, November.
Definitely. Thank you.
And FWC did put in writing in the presentation that that's something they're going to be working with us on. So we're pleased with that going forward.
my concern is about the eggs, and it's not addressed. Or what's addressed in the proposed or final rule now is
It's not the eggs.
no eggs.
Correct. Breeding is currently not allowed for green iguanas or tegus as a
Right.
prohibited species for the purposes of sale, and staff are not recommending to change that.
But a couple of the stakeholders mentioned they'll find a clutch of eggs in the wild and they have to destroy them.
Correct.
And so that's staff's recommendation?
Yes.
Okay.
Another thing we're concerned about is the collection of eggs. Right now, FWC requires any eggs that are found, even if they're in the wild or if lizards have them in captivity, to be destroyed. We think that's an unreasonable requirement, especially since targeting gravid lizards or targeting nests is something that would help eliminate more of those animals in the wild and actually be something that would be very attractive and potentially profitable for collectors.
Clutch of iguana eggs is worth probably $200-300.
And really, I imagine that most people are not going to be destroying eggs that they find in the field.
They're by themselves in the wild.
The financial incentive is to leave those to hatch so they could be collected later.
Because we don't want to increase the business that's around collecting these animals from the wild. The concern there is that you end up with people unintentionally farming the animals, leaving enough out there that they continue to breed, and you have animals that are in the wild continuously to take from the wild.
So if what they say is that they don't want the animals being inadvertently farmed, you should remove this egg destruction requirement because you're actually encouraging exactly what you said you were concerned about in the past. But overall, these changes are positive, and they're an opportunity to get private citizens and private industry involved. And this will all be at no cost to FWC. We will literally be providing the state a service, removing animals, and people will have some financial incentive to do so. And these are non-native animals that FWC doesn't want there. So it only makes sense that they would actually allow you and incentivize their removal from the wild, which is quite different from the previous approach we've had, which is basically amounted to protecting the animals, almost like they're an endangered species or something. The big news for the reptile community is that there are some changes to prohibited species regulations that are going to encourage increased collection and sale of iguanas out of state. We're going to continue to push on other regulations of concern that we think need to be changed to make this whole program work better. But it's a step in the right direction. So we are appreciative of FWC leadership for pushing and making this happen.
You know, we're trying to make best effort. We know the difficulties with the last executive director, Roger. His first thing we told him when he got hired was to go get with this industry and let's make peace, let's work together, let's find out how we can all work together.
And it's been a back and forth. We've had to work very hard on it, but it looks like something positive is actually happening right now. So that's a good thing. So thank you to all of you who have raised your voices and have been involved in this process. It's genuinely made a difference with getting change at FWC, and we are heading in the right direction. So thank you so much for supporting USARK Florida. If you're not a member, please go and join. Follow us on all the social media. So on Saturday, June 7th, we will be having a public meeting at Tampa Repticon. Right after the show, it's going to be at 4 p.m. And USARK Florida is going to be introducing 2 new board members to the public. And we encourage you to come with any questions you have about what's going on with USARK Florida, what's going on with FWC, any input you have, and any issues that you've had that you'd like us to be active on. We want to hear about that too. We want to hear how things are going with you personally with FWC and your inspectors. And so this is an opportunity for you to talk to us and all of us to be together as a community. So we look forward to seeing you at Repticon Tampa coming up on June 7th, right after the show. And if you're there during the show, I'm going to be doing a USARK Florida talk that day at 2 p.m. on June 7th. So come see me, come see the USARK Florida table at the show. And our president, Elizabeth Wisniewski, and most of our board members will be there. And we're going to introduce 2 new board members. So looking forward to seeing you at Repticon Tampa next weekend on June 7th. Thank you very much.